Wait, did you know ancient Egyptian Copts used trained baboons instead of real weapons in cities? Yeah, they did. That's because actual war weapons were too brutal to even be seen in public. And in this episode, we're taking a look at 6 ancient Egyptian weapons that were so brutal, they were basically forbidden. We're talking skull-crushing maces, axes that could take off a man's arm in one swing. Blades so vicious, they were literally banned for anyone who wasn't royalty or elite military. But this makes us think. What kind of weapon makes the state say, yeah, no one should even carry this? Now, to understand how brutal Egypt got, you've got to start with a weapon that left splatter. Number 1. The Skull-Crushing War Mace. The mace is one of ancient Egypt's oldest and meanest weapons. Early pharaohs are often shown swinging them like clubs, literally smashing skulls. Take the Nama palette, for example, made around 5,000 years ago, where King Nama stands over an enemy, mace raised, ready to bring the pain. Rows of severed heads at his feet aren't exactly understated about the message. You see, these maces typically had stone or bronze heads affixed to wooden handles, turning a single blow into a bone-shattering event. Even a single strike could cave in a skull or crack ribs like eggshells. Old Kingdom soldiers favored pear-shaped stone heads, for they were simple, brutal, and super effective. But this also had to do with psychological warfare. You see, pharaohs sometimes executed captives in ceremonies with the mace, to show they were basically gods with permission to squish people. Now just imagine the sight of skulls pulverized, with teeth buried in brain goo. It was definitely not a morale booster for the other side. No wonder the mace became an elite symbol, reserved for kings in official art. It was literally forbidden for common soldiers to brandish it. By the New Kingdom, bronze blades had taken over the battlefield. Still, the mace stuck around in ceremonies. Less for its practicality, more for the fear it represented. Meanwhile, another weapon was making heads roll, literally. Number 2. The flesh-hacking battle axe. Now, if the mace crushed, the battle axe shredded you, with shocking ferocity. Yeah, an Egyptian warrior could swing it so hard that it could slice through a skull or lop off a limb. In one swing, early version axes were just copper blades tied to sticks. But by the Middle and New Kingdoms, bronze axes had become terrifyingly lethal. And from these, 2 main styles developed. One was the wide, crescent-shaped slasher, and the other was a chisel-edged piercer, built to punch through armor. However, both of them could remove heads or shoulders in close combat. Tomb reliefs don't hold back. Enemies are shown with massive gashes and even missing heads. But the real evidence is on a mummy. Pharaoh Seqenenre-Ptah, around 1555 BC, had a 7.5 centimeter cut across his forehead and deep wounds around his eyes, just the kind an axe blade would make. Archaeologists say his skull shows multiple blows, some from blades, others from blunt axe handles. He was quite literally hacked open to the bone. Axes were savage, so only the top fellas used the biggest ones, kind of like a royal badge of brutality. They were banned for regular soldiers, for they were too dangerous. After ancient Egypt went full bronze blade, axes left the battlefield. But, like maces, rulers still carried them in ceremonies, for shock value and intimidation. And while heads flew with axes, arms, legs, and even shields didn't stand a chance against what came next. Number 3. The Khopesh. You probably already know it. The Khopesh. It's that sickle-shaped sword we all picture when thinking of ancient Egypt. It was big, brutal, and oddly graceful. It didn't start life as a sword, though. The Khopesh evolved from battle axes. It keeps that axe's reputation for gruesome damage. Now just imagine a curved blade with a heavy outer edge. Then it hooks inward near the tip, and that curve does 2 jobs. 1, it slashes and chops like an axe. 2, that hooked tip can rip and tear, almost like it's trying to show off. In expert hands, a Khopesh could cut through arms or necks faster than you could blink. Pharaohs in the New Kingdom loved it. They imported it from Canaan. It quickly became their go-to weapon. And yes, they bragged it was much more effective than any the Egyptians had used before. After all, on the battlefield, Khopesh wielders turned fights into messy spectacles. You see, that curve reaches around enemy shields and slices away unprotected flesh. It could also hook their leg or arm, then pull. And ancient accounts don't shy away from gore. Take Amenemhab, an officer under Thutmose III in Syria. The enemy sent a war horse in heat to scare Egyptian horses. So Amenemhab chased it down, on foot, with his Khopesh, and then ripped it open. The horse's belly, guts, and tail were laid out before the king. And yes, he literally cut off the horse's tail and offered it up. Now that's commitment, no? But if bronze could disembowel a horse, you don't have to guess what it did to humans. It was a horror show. And it worked. The psychological effect was huge. Temples and reliefs show pharaohs holding Khopeshes as weapons of terror, replacing old maces in royal art. Meanwhile, on the front lines, simpler tools were doing terrifying work. Number 4. The Spear and Javelin. The spear and its lighter cousin, the javelin, was the go-to weapon for Egyptian foot soldiers. Up close, it wasn't polite. You see, spear thrusts could punch clean through a man. It could pin him to his shield. It could even lift him off the ground. Egyptian art shows us foes getting skewered and suspended by bronze tips. And no, that's not dramatic license. It really happened. Those bronze tips could cut through chest or gut, eventually finding its way into vital organs. Medical texts of the time don't shy away either. They talk about wounds of the peritoneum. Basically, stomachs split open by spears or arrows. Take Pharaoh Sekhmenre-Ptah. His body shows it all. Axe wounds, sure, but also a deep stab at the base of his skull. Apparently, someone thrust a spear up under his head, through his brain. Instant death, gruesome effect. On the battlefield, spearmen moved in tight formations, shields locked, spears ready. At the clash, they'd drive their weapons into enemy bellies or chests, then pull them out. Then, when the main fight was done, those same spears were used to finish the job, right on the ground. And you know, some New Kingdom spears had double-edged points. Some even had little axe blades on the end. Basically a pole axe. You could stab or chop. The wounds were horrific. These were probably elite troop gear, not standard issue. And you couldn't just stroll around with one. And if impalement wasn't enough, ancient Egypt had something else that could kill silently. And from afar. Number 5. the composite bow and arrow's reign of death. Egypt's switch to the composite bow changed warfare in Egypt. Before, they used simple wooden bows. But starting in the Second Intermediate Period, they switched to laminated wood, horn and sinew. This bow had more power and range than anything before. A skilled archer could shoot arrows that pierced through armor and flesh well before enemies got close. Egyptian reliefs and texts loved to brag about this. The goddess Neith was even symbolized by crossed arrows. Pharaohs compared their volleys to divine fury. Thutmose III said his archers at Megiddo rained arrows down on the Canaanites before melee even began. Now just imagine that, a barrage of arrows slicing through flesh. Enemies dropping with shafts in their eyes, throats, and even guts. And those not killed outright often bled out or screamed in pain. Archaeology backs it up too. They found barbed, broad arrowheads designed to maximize damage. One New Kingdom skeleton had an arrowhead lodged deep in a rib and chest. So much internal bleeding, it was probably fatal. By the New Kingdom, Egyptian archers were an elite corps. Their long-range fire often won battles before the first sword clash. Rameses II reportedly had a bow so strong that none other could string it. He even shot arrows through thick copper targets just to show off. Now, it is believed that the state tightly controlled this technology. Composite bows came from official armories, only issued to proven warriors. Legally, peasants had no chance. And while long range was deadly, when you combine it with speed, you get something no one could outrun. Number 6. The War Chariot. The arrival of the horse-drawn war chariot in Egypt changed warfare in ways nothing else could. Introduced by the Hyksos and snapped up fast by New Kingdom pharaohs, it was a fast-moving, two-wheeled stage for a driver and a warrior. And this warrior was usually an archer. This was truly the shock weapon of its day. Picture chariots thundering across open plains, trampling infantry under wheels or hooves. Enemies on the run didn't stand a chance. Archers firing from a moving platform turned retreat into full-blown disorder. Take the Battle of Kadesh. A Hittite chariot charge hit the Egyptian camp by surprise. Chariots smashed through ranks. Infantry who weren't crushed or skewered ran as fast as they could, but often not fast enough. But then came Rameses II. He rallied his own chariot corps and counterattacked. And in the frenzy, Hittite charioteers were thrown out of their chariots. Egyptian soldiers descended on them without mercy. Contemporary reports say Hittites frantically threw themselves into the river to escape the slaughter. And if you couldn't outrun the horses, you were either trampled or speared on the ground. Later Egyptian carvings show crushed chariots, mangled bodies, and piles of severed hands. A pretty grim tally of enemy dead. A war chariot at full gallop was basically a two-horse killing machine. Some later chariots even had scythes on the wheels to mow down infantry. This was a deadly improvement. But even without blade hubs, full-speed impact could shatter bones. And maybe most effective of all, the shock. It was enough to send poorly trained soldiers fleeing at first sight. In ancient Egyptian society, chariots were sacred territory. State-owned horses. Stables were often under palace or temple watch. Only nobles and royal warriors were allowed to train as charioteers. Even captured enemy chariots were carefully logged. They were either added to Pharaoh's fleet or ritually destroyed. And in peacetime processions, only the pharaoh got to ride one, sometimes with bound prisoners draped around it as a threatening show. And these were the 6 most brutal weapons of ancient Egypt. Even today, behind museum glass and silence, all these brutal weapons don't rest easy. In some ways, they hint at the same old warning that not all power is meant to be shared.